together. Did you know that approximately half of the female population worldwide struggle with orgasm, particularly during partnered sex? I myself was one of these women for many years who struggled with orgasm, trying all kinds of therapies and treatment modalities. In the end, it was something I was completely against, cannabis, that finally gave me access to my orgasm. The confidence I gained from my sexual healing inspired me to dedicate my life to helping women unlock their orgasm. And because I can do it, you can too. Joining me today, I'm Dr. Suzanne Mulvihill, your host, a clinical sexologist and orgasmologist specializing in helping you overcome orgasm difficulty. And joining me today is my first guest, Dr. Sebastian Merincolo. He's the author of the book titled The Art of the High, which I have here. Dr. Merincolo pursued his research in the field often fraught with stigma, the use of cannabis. He studied philosophy and linguistics in Germany and at the University of North Carolina, and he earned an award-winning doctorate in the fields of neurophysiology and neurophilosophy and philosophy of consciousness. So, Dr. Merincolo, I would like to welcome you.
Thanks for having me, Suzanne. It's great to be here because I think it's a really important subject, and I followed your work quite a bit, and I'm very happy to be able to contribute to your endeavors.
First podcast on the orgasm. Hopefully, we have a good connection.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you for 2 seconds, so I hope this is not.
Yeah, we had an unstable connection. So for whatever reason, I mean, you are in Germany,
Better
I'm in
now.
Florida. That's possible. That can happen. So
Yeah.
hopefully, it does say we're having a live recording. Hopefully we are. You know.
Let's see.
So tell me the backstory. Like, how did you get involved in this business of cannabis?
Yeah, I was not really involved in the business for a long time, I must say, because for me, the interesting thing was to experience a cannabis high myself when I was maybe in my mid-20s. I had studied philosophy very early on in my maybe already childhood or adolescence. I had begun to be interested in the human mind and the nature of human consciousness. So my background and my interest was always in exploring human consciousness and biological theories of consciousness. Can computers generate or have consciousness someday? You know, something that is now much more urgent question than it was back then. So I chose to study philosophy and looked at the modern philosophy of mind, and ended up in analytic philosophy and studying linguistics also to help with those studies. And that also brought me to study in the United States at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as an exchange student. And so in the late 90s, I worked on my dissertation thesis, and I went back for research to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I had experienced cannabis there also with a friend, and then the high. And he was a toxicologist at that time, or he studied toxicology. He was not a toxicologist at that time, but he studied toxicology. And we thought that it's a really interesting effect that cannabis has on the mind as a whole, and that never kind of, this fascination never left me. So I finished my dissertation thesis, which was on biological theories, radical theories
I have
about.
a question. Were you using cannabis yourself?
Yes.
You were using cannabis, so
yes.
You were experiencing these. Tell me about that experience that you were having with the cannabis.
My first experience, like I said, were before. So when I came back for research, that was when I was in my late 20s. My first experiences were in my mid 20s, and I think I I really made some very good experiences with cannabis because I didn't overdose. At some point, I did
That's important.
overdose, like with a hash pralin at New Year's Eve. I write about that in my book, where I sat down and somebody had just overdosed that. I mean, overdose in the sense of not that it's toxic, but that you really have experienced a very strong high that is hard to, and you go through anxiety and you don't understand anymore what's happening, and you have that fragmented mind and all. So for a while, so I mean, never underestimate that this can be a pretty frightening experience, a traumatic experience too. So dosing is a really important thing. But so for me, my first experiences were positive. I mean, I really had interesting experiences with cannabis. And one of my most important experiences was maybe when I went to Kenya for holidays in the mid-90s, and I came back, and I tried it for the first time, and maybe that's an interesting experience to tell, because I had tried a few times in Kenya and nothing happened, and which is an interesting effect on dosing, which you may know, that sometimes people, even if they try a few times, they don't get any effect, or they may get a little dizzy or tired, but they don't have any effect at all. That happened to me too, and then I went to a Kenyan guy at my hotel and said, maybe Kenyan grass isn't really that strong. That took him by his pride, and he was like, "You come with me," and he took me. That was 3 a.m. before I was supposed to go back to Germany. And then we smoked, and I couldn't inhale. I was not a tobacco smoker. So he was like, "You don't inhale really." And I was like, "How do you inhale?" Because I was only puffing. So he showed me how to inhale. And then I got a full-blown high, which was strong high. It was okay. So we laughed a lot. And then I went in the bus and had to go to an airport for 4 hours, and I giggled my way through to the airport. But then I had to stand up. I started to forget things, and I was like, I'm at the airport. I'm going through customs and all, and they're going to check my passport. I'm in Kenya, and I can't control things. I had to count my bags every time I was moving forward, And so then the paranoia kicked in. And so I went through a really bad stage, and then I went in the airplane, and I remember the feeling of amazement and this feeling of awe, which is really important, also an important feeling that you can have with the high, that you feel like you experience something for the first time, and you marvel at a certain experience of taste, or in that case it was flying, being sitting in an airplane built of like a million parts that takes you very consistently up in the air, and you can look down on the patterns in life. And I thought that was a very remarkable experience for me.
Wow. Well, you shared some really key things that many women have shared with me about the challenges, like if they have, let's since this is like the Orgasm Hour, like where we focus on women with orgasm difficulty and helping women overcome that with cannabis medicine, because cannabis medicine has been statistically shown, not just through my own research, but through 50 years of research. It was first mentioned by Dr. Eric Good in 1970.
Great book.
Was able to orgasm for the first time in her life using cannabis medication. So, medication, but cannabis. But so a couple of points that I heard you share. One was some paranoia the first time you used it. Another point you mentioned was that you didn't get high even the first time you used it, that it didn't work. And I've heard women share that. One, it doesn't work. Two, I get too high, I can't take it. I've been a stoner my whole life. It never worked for me for orgasm. I also have heard I don't like to inhale. Like that's another common comment that I hear from women is I don't like to inhale. So, or I can't inhale. But what I hear you said is you were led to a positive experience, even though it was you went through phases of paranoia and being in an airport, being high. I mean, I probably would have an anxiety attack. I mean, the first time I used it, I did have an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
I was in college. I was 19 or 20, and heading into a physics class. and there were students outside in the parking lot and said, "Hey, we're getting ready for class. Do you want to have a hit of cannabis with us?" And I was like, sure.
Sure.
So I have a hit of cannabis, and I go to class, and I got high, and I couldn't focus. It was not the place to get high. So I really, recommend, for example, when women start using cannabis, that they create a safe setting, and you talk about the setting in your
Right.
book. You talk about the setting, you talk about the dosage. There's a couple things in your book that I wanted to talk also about. You mentioned about here on this page, 142, the feeling of awe that you described about the airplane. That,
Right.
It was beyond your what your normal consciousness would have generated.
Right.
In terms of like, oh, I'm flying, I'm going to Germany now. You
Yeah.
go to this pure place of awe.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about that, because you say here that Albert Einstein on page 143, the most beautiful thing we can experience is mystery. And I have that underlined that you put in your book from Albert Einstein. And because I believe that my personal belief is this mystery is actually the orgasm that women are seeking. They're seeking the ability to quiet this cognitive thinking mind and have this experience of awe. And that can come through the practice. So I'd like to hear more about that, about the mystery of the awe.
Yeah, the feeling of
And how
awe.
we can access it, actually. How do we access that?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you can access that, and that it has been consistently reported from cannabis users, not only in the context of sexual experiences, but all kinds of experiences. It could be a kiss, where you feel like the kiss that you give your partner, girlfriend, wife, whatever partner, feels like you kissed her for the first time, even though you've been together for 10 years. And but it could also be the experience of eating an apple, where you feel like, wow, this is like eating an apple or having this taste for the first time, and you awe and you marvel. This could also start scientific investigations. It did certainly for me, because I felt this for the altered state of consciousness that the high brings. And this is something that you also find in old Aristotle's philosophy, that awe is the beginning of all philosophy, of all science also, because if you look at a tree and you think, hey, how could I run up there to grab a banana or flee from a tiger? That's one thing. But if you look at the tree and you start marveling at how the branches are stretching out and how the bark is structured, etc., then you start to maybe investigate and think about, how does this actually work from the seed to the tree, etc., etc. And cannabis, I think, has that potential to bring us that kind of awe, because it has what I call a multi-dimensional effect on the mind. In other words, it brings a whole spectrum of effects on your mind, and it takes you in a different mode of thinking, and it has various effects on your perception, on your cognition, and on your moods also. So basically, the first thing I always, when I go on podcasts, explain is that most of us are in the grip of a picture about the cannabis high, which is plain wrong, which I would headline as dazed and confused, or happily dazed and confused. So a lot of people think that the cannabis high is something that, you get this kind of euphoria, and you are a bit dazed, you're a bit dizzy, and and confused. So your short-term memory doesn't work right anymore. You forget things. You're losing the thread, and so this is something that actually happens. It can happen if you overdose, if you especially if you have bad aged cannabis, etc. So it's not something that couldn't happen, and it's something that's something I explain in my book, The Art of the High, that a lot of people have been looking for, and it's there was a dynamic system during the Prohibition mostly, where you couldn't get more information. People were really stressed, and they wanted to get rid of their stress, and they looked to cannabis mostly for fragmentation of their minds, and to get that dazed and confused couch lock feeling, where they are maybe happy, maybe they get the munchies, and they are kind of confused, and they forget about their sorrows and their problems and everything, and then they relax. Well, this is a nice thing to have, but it's not the whole potential of the cannabis high. If you know how to dose, if you have access to better material, if you know which variety works for you, etc. Because if you do that, and if you approach it differently with knowledge and abilities, then you can unlock the full potential of cannabis as something that can give you this feeling of awe. And this feeling of awe comes from a whole variety of, I think, cognitive effects, including, for instance, one of the most important is the hyperfocus of attention. And so...
Tension in the body, you mean?
Like, no, sorry. The hyperfocus of attention.
Of attention.
Attentional
okay,
hyperfocus.
I thought you said tension. So the hyperfocus of
tension
attention
is another good. Yeah.
It's attention, right? Tension and attention.
Yeah. So the hyperfocus of attention is something that's very, I think, central to the cannabis high. But it's an interesting thing to discuss because I believe that. There is a difference, of course, between selectively focusing on something right now. If I just eat a strawberry right now and I don't think about other things, and I'm sitting in a dark room, and so I shut down everything else. And I don't listen to music, etc. And I don't talk to somebody, and I sit in a restaurant, and there are special restaurants for that, where you sit in the dark and you only concentrate on the food. You will be hyper focused on the taste, and then you have more nuances in the taste. It will be you will have a stronger and a more intensified experience, and you may also awe at the experience. You're going to be like, wow, there are so many flavors in that strawberry or nut or whatever I'm eating. So this is I think the hyper focus of attention is important. The thing is I don't want to get too long into that one effect of cannabis, but one thing which is key to your cannabis experience is that you have to be able to control what I call jumpy hyperfocus, because it may be that you hyperfocus on one thing now on the straw, and then the next thing is, there's a bird flying, and the next thing is, so you're always hyperfocused on what you see, hear, or feel. Like you feel an itch, and so when you're maybe you can reproduce that feeling when you go through a meditation. When somebody tells you, or when you want to go into a meditation, you feel like, and you want to just say your mantra. First, you feel like, there's an itch in my back, and then you're like, tomorrow I have to go to the supermarket, and so you're jumpy. You're focusing on various things. So that can happen with a high too, but you're more focused on whatever you're focusing on.
So
if you want to.
Yeah. The strawberry, for example, it's a sensory. It's enhancing the experience. Yeah. So I'm trying to relate this, for example, to a woman I interviewed for my research, who had shared with me that she had been raped as a teenager and she had never orgasmed from solo or partnered sex. She told her then partner, listen, I have this problem, which I give her credit for, because there's also another side of that problem where women fake orgasm. So her honesty actually made her vulnerable and opened her up. And her partner, her boyfriend at the time, gave her a hit of he said, try this.
Right.
She orgasmed the first time she used it. And they orgasm. She always uses cannabis before sex. They're married. They've been married now 15 years. And they have teenagers. And now she pays attention, is discreet about using cannabis and at home, obviously, having teenagers at home, and she lives where it's illegal. So, how does that happen? Where I guess that's when we go back to that word mystery that you talked about in your book. How does that happen? Because it's statistically proven.
Right. I believe that it's a complex story, and it's complex because of a very simple fact, actually, because we all have an endocannabinoid system, and if you look at the functions of the endocannabinoid system, so to introduce that really quick, I don't need to tell you, but maybe for your audience, for those who don't know about the endocannabinoid system, whether or not you've ever taken cannabis or been in touch with a cannabis plant, you have an endocannabinoid system in your brain and your body that controls various physiological and mental functions. A lot of them, and it's probably one of the master system for maintaining health and balance and homeostasis.
That was just discovered like 30 years ago.
Was discovered only in the 90s. Most doctors don't know it, even the good ones, because they haven't had it. It's not. I think they're beginning to teach it now at universities, but it's, most doctors have never heard about that, even though it's maybe one of the master system for maintaining health in your body, and it has a whole range of functions. It controls pain, it controls stress, it controls sleep patterns, it controls your immune system, etc., etc. There's a whole variety of function of those that the endocannabinoid system controls, and also in your reproductive organs, etc. And so cannabinoids. And that system works with endocannabinoids and endocannabinoid receptors. So endo always means body made. So your own body has receptors for cannabinoids, and those are produced in your body on demand, and they lock into those receptors, and that's how they do certain things, and they control certain activities. And if you inhale cannabis or ingest cannabis as a plant, so if you use phytocannabinoids, you modulate that system, and you have an effect with it on various endocannabinoid functions. And so you can enhance them, or actually dampen them, etc. So we know that there is an endocannabinoid system in our body, and I believe when it's a really interesting fact when we come to traumatic experiences and sexual experiences, because we know that the endocannabinoid system has certain functions also. Controlling sexual pleasure, for instance, has to do with those receptors. Lubrication may have to do with it. And we know that in your genitals, you have those endocannabinoid receptors, and they're controlling various functions. But also, being able to orgasm has a lot to do, as we all know, with your mind. If you're able to relax, if you're able to trust, if you're able to overcome trauma, or to deal with trauma, etc. And so the endocannabinoid system has also an effect on many mental functions that can help with unlocking your ability to orgasm. And I would like to quickly go through a whole list of at least 20, and I only give you the titles now. I would like to give you a list of 20 cannabis enhancements that people have reported when using cannabis. And wonderful. As I'm going through the list, maybe you yourself think about how could that help with a sexual experience with orgasm. Perfect. So here's the list.
I'll even take a few notes. Let me get a pen and paper, because I'm a pen and paper girl. I love pen and paper.
Which is actually,
these were my notes. I think from my last high.
And this is one of the major pieces of advice I give in my book, is to keep a journal, keep a high notebook.
These are,
if you have good ideas, write down at least just a sentence, and you'll remember the rest.
Sometimes I'll forget them. If I don't, if I don't capture it in that moment, like when I get what I call a download, when a download drops in of information or guidance, if I don't write it down, I can come out of the high and I'm like, now what was that? There was something really important. So the really super important things, I will actually pop out of the high, because I have to pop out to write it down. Like I can't, I have to open my eyes, go get a pen and paper. I try to keep a pen and paper next to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, go with these 20 things, and I'm looking forward to them.
Yeah.
I'm going to start.
Yeah, let's go. So here,
Let's go.
we talked about the hyper focus of attention. 1, 2, intensification of sensory experience, which probably also comes with the hyper focus of attention, or is caused by it. Also, you have more details in your experience. So we talked about that. You feel more details. The feeling of awe.
Maybe we can talk about these as we go through this list, because I think this can be the essence of. I mean, like going back. To
I just make a few comments.
Okay.
I don't. You stop me if you want.
Go ahead down the list, and I'll go back through them. Go ahead.
And you don't have to. You can stop me in the middle if you have questions. We go right at it.
Number 2, the intensification of the sensory experience
and
is a critical one.
Plus more detail, which is really important.
And the more detail. So being in the when you talk about hyper focus, I think of that. So these 3, the hyper focus, the more detail, the sensory experience. I'm going to use my own experience that got me back. That I was against cannabis, as I said. I was married to someone who had a problem with addicted to cannabis. So I hated it. We never used it together ever. I was never high. I raised 2 children. Like, it was against my belief system to use cannabis, but I kept, and I had this orgasm problem, right? Seeing sex therapists trying to work this problem out. So the point I want to make is the intensification of the sensory experience combined with the ability to focus and relax is what allowed orgasm to flow for me. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe this after, all this talk therapy and, all these tantra, all these different practices. It was this intensification of the sensory. I felt sensation.
Yeah.
I felt something and I was able to focus on it without, am I making too much noise? Is there someone, am I taking too long? Is someone watching me? All that stuff. So, okay, let's keep this list. Let's go to number 4.
4. So 3 was feeling of awe, which is always connected to it, where you suddenly feel like it's a stunning experience, and the freshness of experience is there as if it would be for the first time. 4.
I burst out into tears after that happened for me. Into tears. Number 4.
Yeah, I believe that. Number 4 is an interesting one. What I call a meaningful redirection of attention. And this is interesting because if you think about it, our attentional pattern as we go through the world is, of course, controlled by our beliefs, desires, wishes, where we come from. Think about 3 guys walking down the same street. One is fleeing from the police. The other guy is just hungry, and the next guy just won in the lottery or something. So the first guy is just looking for exits. He's just looking for, where can he hide? Are people recognizing him? Where's the police? The second guy walks through and he's just looking for restaurants. Where can I eat? Is that too expensive? The third guy is just maybe daydreaming and he doesn't even see the street because he's like, oh, what could I do with $1 million that I just won? So these 3 guys have 3 different attentional patterns going through the world, and their experience of the same walk will be absolutely different. Now, with cannabis, what I call a meaningful redirection of attention is very often connected to what people say, for instance, that they redirect their attention to memories, but also to their body. We're coming later to that enhanced body sensation, but it's all like the feeling of their body. Suddenly you sit in front of the computer, and instead of focusing on you're getting high, and instead of focusing on the text, you suddenly feel like, oh my God, my shoulder hurts. And then you feel like, I've been sitting here cramped for like a week or so, and I don't attend to my body anymore. And you suddenly, because that signal of your body is enhanced and stronger, you suddenly feel like, yeah, it's my posture. I didn't do my yoga. I'm not doing sports anymore. And I'm sitting like this. And this is why I feel this horrible way. So you have that redirection of attention very often. This could also be, and we come to that later, that you redirect your attention to the body language of your partner. So you don't listen anymore to what he or she says, like verbally, but you're like, oh, she seems anxious, or she seems happy, or she seems depressed, even though she says something to cheer me up. Maybe I attend to that better. So a redirection of attentional patterns change, and they very often change to for us to go to, for instance, to empathic signals, to body signals, to our own body, to other bodies. Not only, but it's there is a change, a breakup in how you perceive
Absolutely.
things in the world.
Yeah.
So that was number 4. Now we're at 5, a greater acuity and perception that we already had above, and 2. Now we go to 6, synesthetic experiences. It's an interesting one. Synesthetic experiences, I only mentioned that real quick, is, for instance, when you hear a guitar solo and you see accompanying colors with it. So that doesn't happen with a normal high. If you have a very strong high, or if you're under a large dose of LSD, for instance, these things happen. You like people have reported they are going through, they touch a doorknob or some metallic doorknob, and they have a corresponding taste experience with it. This is interesting also to explain creativity, but I'm not going to go into that right now, because it doesn't, for normal doses, you don't feel it, but it may have an effect, maybe an interesting part of the story when it comes to explaining other effects like enhancements of creativity. Now we're at 7, enhanced episodic memory retrieval. This is something that has been reported so often, as so, I think, such an important effect that that you need to talk about and think about the implications. A lot of people talk about short-term memory disruptions, which can happen, where you talk or you listen to somebody and you're like, oh, what did I just think about or talk about? Happens during a high. You can control that. There are various ways and factors where you can control it. But
and I'd love to chime in here for my own personal experience, because it relates both to the number 5 with the, like you called it, the acuity. Tell me number 5 again.
Greater acuity and perception. I've taken that out of 2, so in that you have more detail.
And the episodic memory. So the first time I got hot, remember I told you about my first experience when I was in college, and fast forward till January of 2018. That was the next time I used it. So it was some 40 years later. And I decided I wanted to use it. I was in what's called an orgasmic meditation community, which is now kind of, there's some people that still do orgasmic meditation. It was a very powerful group for me. I went back forth to London for 7 months for that training. But anyway, I wanted to use cannabis. So I took this guy brought over this bong, and I had 1 hit of the bong. I didn't feel anything, Now I didn't wait long enough. I had 2 hits of the bong. I'm like, I still don't feel anything. I had 3 hits from the bong, and within a few seconds, I was on the floor.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that this episodic memory retrieval, like, it actually had, there was nothing I could do but lay down. I did feel safe. I didn't feel any panic, but it brought me back to a spot, because I was in an abusive marriage. I was in an emotionally abusive marriage. So I didn't have physical bruises on my body that would say, I am abused, but I was mentally manipulated and abused. So what came back was an exact spot of when that happened. I was able to retrieve the scene of when he would tell me, there's something wrong with your brain.
Right.
And it would be the moment that I would surrender up to this long fight, I was told. So that is such, and this is why it's so important, even in relation to the work that I'm doing with women, of these mental and emotional blocks. Like cholesterol, we can see buildup of cholesterol in our blood, in our arteries, but we cannot see the buildup of emotional trauma, other than through these blocks that come up through orgasm, etc. So
we even have a mechanism, a mental mechanism, to not see it, because we want to suppress it for a while. Because and it is a good mechanism for a while, because it helps us to survive and to deal with it if it's a strong trauma. But at some point, if you want to deal with it and go further and don't want to get stuck with it, you have to address it in a therapeutic setup.
This is just very well said. The episodic memory retrieval. So that was like just one of my examples, and I still am unraveling the abuse that I experienced 30 some years ago. Like,
right.
Oh, that's what and it comes to me through these cannabis experiences, using it specifically, not that I'm like, okay, I want to retrieve a memory. No, it's the teacher, it's the guide, it's my higher wisdom. So anyway,
exactly. And this is what I also mean by, it's an interesting thing if you say teacher, because that's what I also meant by meaningful redirection of attention. Suddenly, like memories also, not only patterns and like patterns of nonverbal behavior, etc., that you focus on that are important, but also maybe experiences from way back come, and they're not erratic. Some of them are important. They're key experiences in your life. And so that's what I mean, also by the meaningful redirection of attention suddenly. And this is probably also, we're going to come to that with the mood modulation effects, that very often you have that anxiolytic effect. So you're losing your inhibitions, you're losing your fears, or your fears are less. And so something happens if connected with episodic memory, which is to some degree seems paradoxical, but it's very logical if you think about it. Let's say exactly the situation you're telling me about, that you think about a traumatic experience that comes up. You get high, you have less fears to think maybe, and now access in detail a traumatic experience, which is great. But then you could be in a terrible state because you're reliving that experience. So now you're becoming, maybe if the trauma comes back, it could be something that's terrifying and that leads you to panic again. So that's something also. Or it could be something that helps you to digest it. Exactly. Because you are, if it goes right, and usually it goes in that direction, you're confronted with it, but in a situation where you are less fearsome, where your inhibitions are down, and where you can actually observe it a little bit from a more mindful perspective, like as you look at it from somebody else's view. But there is a danger. There is something that, and it could be that traumatic experiences come up. And so you should be in a safe environment. If you feel like it could be, for some people, it could be something where they feel, oh no, I don't, this was problematic and something came up, you need to address it. But anyway, so that was.
That's actually a whole show.
That is a really interesting show on that.
This is just a touch on one aspect of using cannabis to heal from, and not just heal from it, but gain a perspective from the trauma. So that it's processed. Let's say that, like, the trauma becomes, oh, now I understand. Yeah. So okay, but there's a whole episode on that. Number 7.
Yeah. Let's do a full show on that. Now we're at 7. At 8. Intensified imagination.
Oh yes.
And imagination is something very underestimated. I learned that from neuroscientists like Michael Gazzaniga, so there are 2 ways in which we underestimate the power and the importance of imagination in our thinking and in our lives. We very often believe of imagination comes from image, from imaginere, from the Latin word. We think of pictures. So we think, okay, imagination is, I imagine a certain situation, I have an imagery of a certain situation. Well, yeah, but it could also be a gustatory experience. It could also be a kitchen chef who sits down and thinks about, hey, gets high, has an enhanced imagination, and thinks about how a certain type of dark chocolate could go with a mango and a caramel and whatever sweet basil taste. And because he has that enhanced type of imagination, not only for images, but also for gustatory experiences, he may be able to think, hey, yeah, maybe let's try that in the kitchen. I try to use these herbs with that kind of chocolate with pepper and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly you have a really creative asset for yourself. So this is one way in which we underestimate imagination, is that we usually think of images. It's not only images. You could imagine feelings, you could imagine sounds, you can imagine other things. So,
well, and here again with women with orgasm issues, like I kind of try to turn this, if we think of a triangle, for example, and women having, we always think of this as the physical orgasm. Everybody wants this, like the physical orgasm. They want that.
Right.
And that's what the frustration is. I'm not having this. But if we can tip that triangle upside down and start, or look at this part as the dream state orgasm, the imagination orgasm. I mean, we're able to
Right.
orgasm in our sleep.
Yeah.
Without physical touch, and men too. So, I'm trying, one of my roles is to help women start expanding their whole idea of orgasm and look at the experience of orgasm with imagination, accessing it.
Yeah.
Learning
Yeah.
how to surrender first. Many women are like, I don't want to let go of control. I don't want to surrender. I don't want to let go of control. I'm like, well, there's your problem. So using imagination to unlock the orgasm issues that women have.
Yeah.
Very good.
And imagination. Yeah. So let's
Number 9.
we could talk about imagination all day long, because it's really an
That's another
interesting
whole
subject.
show. Exactly.
Another whole show. Yeah. So 9 is, I want to go just shortly in it, but it's an interesting thing. Mind racing. It's something where you feel like your mind is going faster. And I think it happens. It depends on the variety. I think a lot of things depend on the variety of cannabis that you have and the dose. That could go negatively. Some people feel like their mind is racing and they can't really control it anymore, and they don't really, they're losing the thread, etc. Sometimes it can be very positive because you're racing into your past, or you're going through a lot of associations. So that is something that can be very useful. It can be also something for people where they feel like they don't want it. Then you have 10. 10 is something that is also very crucial for an orgasm, and for the whole sexual experience, is the distortion. I call it distortion of time perception, because sometimes, and very often, you feel like an experience is endless. You feel like you're in eternity. And that's how Ludlow, I think, described it. He felt like he was in eternity when he used high doses of hashish, the American writer. But it could also, sometimes people feel like they're smoking a lot, and then they're laying down, and then they come to so to say, and they feel like, oh, whoops, the sun is set, and the whole day is gone. Where did the day go? Sometimes you can have that effect too, but very often, and the powerful effect, I think, for sexual experiences is that they feel prolonged. You seem to have more space. So it's not only an intensified experience, but you feel like you're in eternity with the experience, which is, if it's a pleasurable experience.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Time, it doesn't exist in those moments.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter even.
It doesn't. And it doesn't matter if you have to do something later or tomorrow, because time doesn't exist. You're just there. It's being in the here and now.
You're just there.
And you're just there, and you're just fully exposed to the whole complexity and the whole pleasurable experience that you're just having. So with that, having said that, we're coming now to the really interesting things that the potential of cannabis, that the enhancement potential that I've been looking at a lot, is 11, enhanced pattern recognition. Enhanced pattern recognition abilities are reported so often that it's really an ubiquitous experience, and people describe all kinds of patterns that when they're high, that they experience them better. And we'll come later to the enhanced empathic understanding, that's number 16, where this enhancement of pattern recognition also plays a role, because, for instance, when I have sex with somebody and I can empathically understand the patterns, the behavioral patterns and the language patterns and those things better, I might be better able to respond. I mean, if I go through a certain routine of movements and I feel like I never really feel the feedback pattern from my partner, and then maybe I never really help her to come to an orgasm. If at a certain point I'm high and I feel like, wow, I now realize that she doesn't respond to whatever I'm doing there, and maybe I need to change, whatever I have to do. And maybe she gives me signals already, but I'm not hearing them or seeing them. So pattern recognition is something that's absolutely crucial on all levels. And we have number 12, an enhanced ability of language understanding, which may have to do with pattern recognition. Very often, I experience it very often with a foreign language. When you're high and you listen to a foreign language that you're not really proficient in, or that you don't know that well, suddenly you will feel like, oh, now I understand the whole thing. I don't understand only fragments, but I really feel better. I understand better what is meant, what is said, and I understand the humor and all the connotations. 13 is enhanced body perception. Now, this is one for another show, of course.
That's a critical one too.
And we know that. This, of course, goes along with the intensification of sensory experience, but here it's an even more intense feeling. So I can intensify my visual experience of an image, which is one thing, but the other thing is if I intensify and if I have an enhanced ability to feel my body, to feel how, like, I drink some water and I feel how it goes down my throat and in the body, and I suddenly feel like what water means to me, what it means to my whole system, because I feel like this is life, this is like our breathing, and you suddenly feel like, wow, my body just celebrated me drinking a half a glass of water, because I've been sitting here I'm that kind of person. I forget to drink, for instance.
Yeah, I have a gallon that I try to drink close to that gallon. I use that gallon jug every day, so I know that I'm drinking out of it.
Yeah.
How much I drink today? Okay, how much I drink today?
Yeah, that's good.
But I think this body, I want to use it as a body image aspect. Many women who struggle with orgasm struggle with body image.
Yeah.
Where they're not comfortable in their own body. And they'll even mention that, and say to me, I struggle with my body image. I struggle with orgasm. I struggle with my body image. So what I'm hearing from this one also is an appreciation of the body, like perhaps the healing of this body image that, wow, my body, how intelligent our body is. Really. Yeah. The intelligence and the beauty of our bodies. Yeah. And the pattern, when you talked about jumping back or tying into pattern recognition, what I hear about that is flow state, accessing, like, am I in a flow state? Am I flowing with my partner? Am I flowing or am I controlling? And, some of what I teach women is to de-pattern the old patterns of the goal of orgasm. Like, we can't control the goal. Yeah. Our job, our role is to experience what we're experiencing so our body can orgasm. That's pretty much it. Even though we try to, it's like we want to control it. That's not going to work. We can't control it. In fact, the control is the problem that's inhibiting it. It's the lock, part of the lock.
Yeah, yeah. You certainly can't control it, but you can do things to make it easier, to make it happen. And but you have to also have to get away from the pattern of insisting too much and to be too focused on having that goal achieved, especially if it's, for instance, for a purpose of making your partner happy or whatever. But it's like I totally understand if you feel like I want to have that feeling, and you are being focused on that, and you're being kind of obsessed with that. It is a totally understandable feeling, and it's I think it's already a step ahead, because a lot of people, they don't value their orgasms. They don't value their altered states of consciousness to make it a larger point. We have, and this is something that I'm trying to explain to people with my book, The Art of the High, also, is that altered states of consciousness, and orgasm is an altered state of consciousness. That's
right.
It's a different, I like to call it a mode of consciousness, because if we say altered, we always think that, we have this one mode of consciousness and everything else is kind of like if you twist it, to an unnatural shape, then it's no. Sleep is a very natural state of consciousness. You may call it altered, but it's a different state of what we usually in the wakefulness rational mode have. And we have all kinds of altered states of consciousness or modes of consciousness that we're going through daily, even if we take cannabis or LSD or not. We value those, and those give us meaning in our lives. Trance states, ecstasy states, sleep states, half-sleep states. These are some of the most important. And think about, if you go back in your life, some of the most important things happen in those states to us, and they have a huge meaning for us. So if somebody, I think many people underestimate the power of an orgasm, or they forget about it because there's all that stigma around it, or they feel like they have to have it for some reason to show off, or because advertisements tell them, or whatever.
They don't do this with sleep,
but they don't really do it to include it in their lives as an important state, And so I think those people who are already obsessed and focused are a step ahead, because they've understood that this is something that can bring them great joy in their lives.
I actually agree with you. That's important. My struggle with orgasm, seeing 4 sex therapists over 30 years. I went and I had a private session with Dr. Betty Dobson in New York, back in like 2017, 2018, before she died. She died a couple years ago, unfortunately. But I had a private session, a 4-hour session with her in New York City, because I realized after seeing the 4 sex therapists, the answer isn't here.
Right.
After 4 of them, after 30 years, you know what? And you know what did it for me was I heard about this guy named Rinpoche, who healed his gangrene through meditation. Now, he meditated 8 hours a day. His option was to cut off his leg by 4 doctors or whatever, and he decided to meditate, and he healed his gangrene. And I thought, shit, if I can, I don't know if I said a bad word, but maybe they could take that out. But if they can, if he could heal his gangrene with meditation, I can heal my orgasm. And that brought me on an inner journey. Stop looking outside. Women try buying new, faster vibrators, more sex toys, a suction toy, this toy, It's really going within, but it's a powerful search versus shutting it off completely. Because some women just say, forget about it. I'm not doing it. I'm not even going to try.
And I think I vaguely remember, I think, I'm not sure if that was Paul Václavic or who that was, a therapist who said that, it's a long time ago, who said that he had a couple coming in and they had problems. I'm not sure if it was the man or both of them having orgasm. I think it was both of them coming to an orgasm. And at some point he calls that paradoxical intention, I think. I pulled that from somewhere way back here. I hope I'm accurate in that. And he said that he told them at one point, he tried to give them some therapy and some inspiration. At some point he said, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I want you can do everything, you can kiss, etc., but you're not going to have intercourse, and I don't want you to have orgasm. This is crucial for the therapy. Don't do it. And they came back, with a guilty face the next time. They said, we have to confess something. And he was like, well, I hope you didn't. And they were like, yeah, we had an orgasm. And he was like, okay, there you go. So what I mean to say is that pursue the goal, but sometimes it may be, that sounds paradoxical. Sometimes you have to maybe take a step back and relax and confide and be trust in your body and in the process that it's going to happen if you're relaxed. And cannabis can help you with that a lot, which brings me back to my list.
Yes, let's go, because we've got like 6 minutes left, so let's go through these and we'll give them. And in fact, we can when we post this, we can post this list to our listeners, that they can access this book.
Yeah, we can do that.
About that.
I send you that.
Okay, so let's go. We're on 13.
We are on 13, enhanced body perception. 14 is mood modulation.
Okay.
14 is mood modulation. Of course, you can modulate your mood with cannabis. You can have euphoria, but this also depends on the variety that you're taking, et cetera, et cetera. You can have.
It depends what mood you go into it with.
Yeah,
my
totally.
experience. If
Absolutely.
I go into it it depends on how I don't use it to actually change my mood. I have to be in the proper mood to enter the state. Because if I enter it in a frustrated state, it enhances the feeling of frustration. So I've learned that I got to be in the right, at least for me, I need to enter it in a proper, in a sacred, today. But anyway, being aware of how we enter the state, and then modulate it within.
Mindfulness is the key here. The thing is, of course, some people who have depression and other states, even anxiety, if you turn to CBD, may be helped with using cannabis, but then you should probably do it in a therapeutic session. And first, it really takes some knowledge. And before I end the list, or when I end the list, I want to come back to what I call the persistent mindful surfer approach, because that's very crucial to experiencing that. But here, the four last things, sorry, to mention are enhanced empathic understanding. Oh no, sorry, we are at 15, enhanced introspection. We talked about that, what concerns our body, but also you have, during the high, you have an enhanced ability sometimes to introspect and to reflect on yourself as a personality. Has probably also to do with your ability to perceive patterns better, and suddenly you understand, oh, I've always been defensive or aggressive or this or that. A lot of people have mentioned those experiences. Then that's something very important to me. Number 16, enhanced empathic understanding, because you hear about that if you listen to the story of children on the autistic spectrum, people with Asperger's. It's absolutely fascinating to see how, for instance, kids with very strong types of autism are starting to show social behavior when they are medicated with mostly THC cannabis. But that's a long story. I've talked about that for a long time. This was something that I found already in 2008, and I didn't know, because at that time I had already started working, or later in 2009 I started working 2008 with Lester Greenspoon, who had become a good friend of mine, and who wrote a foreword to one of my books. And we had a lot of discussions about that, but I didn't know at that time. I stumbled upon it by coming from enhanced empathic understanding from a normal person, from myself and others, to that. And then I suggested that it could probably help autistic, or people on the autistic spectrum, and people with Asperger's maybe. And Lester had already been advising people on the autistic spectrum to try it. And then I found out later about it. And that was totally amazing for me, because it confirmed what I deduced from somewhere else.
Well, and we can go. I don't want to rush us. If you go 10 minutes over, we're fine. I mean, I have this. So let's just get. But I want to just mention this empathetic understanding.
Empathic understanding.
Bringing it back to women with orgasm difficulty and frustration to have this understanding for themselves.
Yeah.
To gain a higher understanding and self-compassion, which may be one on your list, but it's because they're caught in a pathway, which I know it because I was on it too, that how can I have, like, I used to tell people it was easier for me to get an MBA than it was to have an orgasm. It's very easy. Just follow these steps. Like I kept looking for the steps. Like which therapist has the steps, you know? And it wasn't the steps. They were within me, to stop judging myself, you know, to stop, like you said, even let's just experiment. What does my body even feel? Right. Like what patterns am I doing that are actually, I'm going to say, they're working against me and de-patterning.
That's a great point, because the empathic understanding also goes to your former self, probably, that you are empathically able to understand who you were and why you made certain decisions.
For her.
And for
I
instance,
think,
if you have
yes.
trauma issues and if you feel shame or guilt, or very often you feel like, oh, I could have, or shouldn't I have, or why didn't I, you can understand probably better, and you can forgive yourself better, and that leads also to something in 20 I talk
Oh, I
about
can't wait.
mental
Okay, so we're
healing.
at 17. Let's go to the next one. 17.
uh, 17 was basically the enhanced sexual experience that
Oh,
we're talking
yes.
about all the time now. 18 is enhanced creativity,
Yeah.
and which also plays a role in the sexual experience. 19 is spontaneous insights, which has to do with creativity, but I distinguish those two. And 20 is mental healing, for instance, in confrontation with a trauma in an anxiolytic state. But so all these things can happen. They are not, technically speaking, they're not effects of cannabis. This is very important. I believe, and this is an important message that I want to now shortly only really mention when I go when we look at that list. Cannabis is a tool, and I tell people also in my book, The Art of the High, to use, or actually I use it in another book, Elevated, Cannabis as a Tool for Mind Enhancement, which is from 2023, and is for those who want to read like the background to The Art of the High, which is more psychology, cognitive science, philosophy based. And I talk about what I call the PERMIS approach, which is the persistent mindful surfer approach, which means, in short, be mindful about your cannabis approach. Learn about cannabis varieties. Learn about a little bit about the endocannabinoid system, how you can modulate it. Learn something about surfing the high, or what you said, to create a flow state.
Yeah.
Dosing is crucially important. The method of application is crucially important. When you talk about orgasm, for instance, which would be another whole show, would be, you can use cannabis. You can inhale cannabis and get a high. You can ingest cannabis to get a high that comes more out of your body, or you can apply topical. You can use topical application of cannabis in your vagina or wherever, to generate completely different effects. That's an interesting story in itself, and you can also balance those and make experiences with it. So what I mean by permis is like from permittance, is like this allows you the persistent. You got to be persistent, because it's not like you go to a company, to a doctor who will tell you do this and that, take this dose and this, and it's work.
Consistent.
You
Persistent
got to
and
be
consistent.
Yeah, you got to have that attitude of persistence, and you have to be mindfully experimenting yourself, because we are all unique in our physiology, in our whatever we have experienced, in our if we had traumas or not, and how open we are to new experiences, etc. So we need to find out how to use various varieties of cannabis in various situations. We need to be able to control the set and setting. And that's why I tried. This all sounds really complicated, but I think there are some simple heuristics, some simple methods to give you about dosing and about using the right method of application. And so I've tried. That's what I've tried to do, and that's what I'm doing in my book, The Art of the High, is to give a really short introduction for people to find their way, how to come to those enhancements, and very practical and hands-on how to approach dosing, to learn something about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system, and about their own mental realm.
Yeah. The inner voyage, as you talk about. A high can help us to come to introspective insights in many ways if we're ready for it. And, as we approach the closing of our show, I want to mention about a woman who had 3 surgeries and that changed the shape of her vagina, and she lost her ability to orgasm. And she learned about cannabis, and it took her a year of trial and error. She started to have sensation return, but it took her a year to get for her orgasm to return. Let's put it that way. So when we talk about this being persistent and being consistent, how critical that is, because I've had women that say, I tried it once, it didn't work. We live in a very instant gratification. I can order something on Amazon and have it delivered this afternoon.
Yeah.
So orgasm doesn't work like that, you know. And I look at this the whole concept of the cholesterol as an analogy. You know, if someone finds out they have high cholesterol and they have some blockages in their artery, it's not going to be fixed like when the Amazon package arrives. Orgasm works like that too. It's going to take time to dissolve and open up the pathways in the body and the mind.
Right.
So, and we're in the process of creating training programs. This is another step, the Orgasm Hour, to begin to really educate women and empower them to be persistent and consistent. Because the end result, like as someone who struggled for 30 years, you know, I was definitely persistent and consistent. I just had to get on a different track.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, I had to get on a different track. And when my orgasm came back, like when I did pleasure practices, I mean, that's what I'm going to be training women on, is how to do, like, for difficult cases like mine. But I mean, it changed my life. I sold my company. I had a plant business that I sold in 2020. I went back to school for my PhD. I studied women with orgasm. And I mean, and you actually wrote a letter, thank you, for several of the states that we changed laws so far in 2 states.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. To add female orgasm difficulty as a condition of treatment with medical cannabis in the states of Illinois and Connecticut, and New Mexico, we're hoping will be next. Their board approved it, and we've got 11 other states in various states. Some of them denied it. We need to reapply, etc. But
again,
yeah, my hope is that we empowered our audience, men and women. I mean, because men are with partners who men have orgasm difficulties too. It's not as prominent. And it doesn't even exist anymore in the as a diagnosis. They took it away for men, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It used to be female orgasmic disorder, male orgasmic disorder. Now it's female orgasmic disorder and delayed ejaculation. I'm not kidding you. That's what's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I'll probably get a letter about that. But if they're going to, anyway, that's another.
Says something about humanity, doesn't it? Where we are in 2000, what are we, 25? And, you know, like, that's the Stone Ages. It's horrible. Yeah.
So, anyway, I want to end on a positive note, and thank you so much, Dr. Merincolo and Sebastian, and for really being on the ride with us and being our first guest, my first guest.
It was my honor.
Yeah, the art of the high, like to think about the high as an art, that it's going to be looked at different. A piece of art is looked at, because my friend in Switzerland was like, oh my God, I love the title of that book, The Art of the High. So, yeah.
It is.
Thank you.
I also call it the counterculture answer to The Art of the Deal. But it's I believe my previous editor, publisher, also suggested The Mindful High, which would also be a good title. But I like The Art of the High because I really think that you need to. It's really an art, because you need to be able to use that tool of cannabis like an artist, and think about also yourself as a piece of art, something you're working on. And you need not only knowledge but also skills. And this is why I like the surfing metaphor also in that, because if you want to be a good surfer, and you want to get in the flow of surfing, it's not enough if I tell you things, you have to go out in those waves and in those two waves you do that. No, you have to be out there in the waves, and you have to go get on the board, and you have to learn how to keep your balance. You have to be on there, and your body has to learn it. It's something that's going to be in your body, and this is something for many people. They're intuitive about it. They understand when they smoke or when they vaporize cannabis, you know, when it's good for them, when it's enough for them. They understand. They can already feel mentally how it feels to them, if a certain variety works for them or not. But it's easier to learn, and I think what I've tried to do was to to look at a huge field of knowledge. I called this the New Guinea approach, like the guerrilla neurophilosophical approach, which was not only to use my experience, but to look anthroposophically into a whole field. And that's guerrilla because a lot of those people were illegal growers, what they said about the plant, but also people who used cannabis. And I worked a lot with Lester Greenspoon because he has collected those anecdotes already. And then to look into the studies and into the endocannabinoid system, and to put all that knowledge in a pot and try to sort out and to make suggestions of what can we say about those really higher cognitive mechanisms and how cannabis affects things like empathic understanding and introspection, because you can't read that off studies because they're not there directly, but you can access and intelligently and critically approach the issue of looking at a whole huge body of data, and that's what I've tried to do, and then compress it into my scientific writing, but also to make a guidebook, which is The Art of the High, your guide to using cannabis for an outstanding life.
You did a great job, and
thank you.
If you're interested, this is the copy, The Art of the High. They can access that, I believe, probably through Amazon.com, right? You can order it through Amazon.
Yes,
and,
yes.
If anyone wants to reach you personally, do you have an email or website?
I have an email. My website is in German and English. It's Sebastian Merincolo with C, Merincolo, sebastianmerincolo.de. And I'm also now offering personal coaching with cannabis, life coaching. So if you are interested in that, reach out to me. And I can also help you if you feel like reading a book may not be enough. So that's where I'm going, because I feel like, and this is something you and I probably are, and all of those who are navigating that field of cannabis and who know about its powers is always so rewarding to see when people actually learn how to use this as a tool and how powerfully it can change lives and have an impact on lives.
Absolutely.
Contrary to what a lot of people think.
Well, especially as one who was against it. I mean, it's kind of, ironic that I never would have in my wildest dreams imagined that cannabis would have been what solved my 30-year orgasm problem. Not in my wildest dreams. Not in my wildest dreams. I mean, I'm serious. So I know that there's many women that think like that, like me. Like I did. Like, oh my God, I'm not using that. I don't want to be high when I'm having sex. So those are some of the things that, we're going to be working with women on, and through Female Orgasm Training Institute, where we're starting training programs and to help women access their orgasm with cannabis medicine. So
that's beautiful. It's excellent. I love it.
Thank you for joining us today. And this will, as far as I know, it's live, and I'm going to record it, and then it'll get posted on a number of sites. So thank you again.
Lovely.
Dr. Sebastian, wonderful having you on. Okay.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so you're still here, and
I'm
we
still
stopped recording. Okay, cool. So, so how was it? I mean,